America, my name is Osei-Frimpong, and we're watching the Black Athenians today, and I come to you every Friday at 4-ish. And today we're going to talk about the real problem with reparations. And it's not a problem that's insoluble, it's just people get this wrong in a lot of different ways, so I'm just going to clarify what the stumbling block is because it's my gift. And it's a gift I give to you every Friday for about a half hour from Broderick Studio in the Iron Triangle in Athens, Georgia. All right, so I'm going to start with a little story. One of my good friends is a professor. She was elected chair of her department by her department. They all got together and they just kind of sat around and voted, and she was elected chair of her department. And so when she went to the dean and said, my department has elected me chair, and by the way, I expect to get paid somewhat next to what the previous chair was paid. What happened was the dean made a few phone calls, other faculty in her department, and said, you know what, I really don't want, my friend to be chair. Can you find somebody else? In which case, the other professors in the department said, sure, why not? Because the dean is the one who decides who gets on sabbatical and who can get a teaching relief and who gets a X or Y grant. So, the dean said it would really make me feel better if you just invalidated that election and gave the chair position to someone else. And so the department validated the election and gave the chair the position to someone else. And one of my friend's colleagues in the department said, well, I'll just be the chair then. And so that's what happened, right? And they did all of this without talking to my friend. All right, so my friend is in the position where she was elected, had a position, and then with just one little phone call from the dean, like it was all invalidated and taken away, right? All because she wanted to get paid as much as her predecessor. All right, so what does that mean? How do you make that situation whole? What can the rest of her department do for her to let her know that it won't happen again, that the department is trustworthy, that it won't just capitulate to the dean's power without even a fight? Like, how do you make that situation whole? How can my friend ever trust that department again? All right, so you say, but you're talking about reparations. What does that have to do with reparations? Black people, we are in the exact same situation. The issue with our place in America is that the U.S. government says, black people, you have rights. Black individuals, you have rights. And then the moment white people get a little bit nervous, the U.S. government just capitulates at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local level to white supremacy. This is how Reconstruction ended. This is the history of black people in the United States. So whatever kind of reparations we get in terms of fixing the racial wealth gap, none of it's secured as long as we know that the U.S. government is the kind of government that will always just capitulate to white anxiety. Like, they have rights because they're backed by the U.S. government. We don't have rights because the U.S. government won't back our rights against white power. And what can the U.S. government say to us that'll mean no, this time we're serious. This time we're not going to capitulate. We're done capitulating to white power if white people get nervous. Because until that happens, black people won't be free. Because our freedom won't ever be secured by our governing entity. And you need that for objective freedom. So with that, I want you to think about that. The problem is the restitution, making black people whole, rectifying the racial wealth gap. That's one thing. That's one thing. But that's completely different from black people knowing from this time forward, we are secure in America and the government won't capitulate to white anxiety. Because even if you do all of the other kind of restitution, but black people still know that the government's going to capitulate And the government's got like legitimate access to tanks and stuff. If we know, and legitimate access to like arresting people who are going to come after us. So if we know that the government's just going to let the white Klan come take our stuff, or the government's just going to like Tulsa, just going to drop bombs, then whatever we have, we'll never really have. Because remember what happened in Tulsa in 26. Black people had stuff. Didn't matter. Because what they didn't have is the full faith of their government to secure their rights. And with that, go ahead and hit the beat.
Yeah. Sound good to me. Never change the ways for the world or the government. If I was the president, then I would state facts. You leave it up to me, I paint the White House black and I'm featuring your front.
I'm back and I'm talking about reparations. And the real problem with reparations is not necessarily restitution. It's what does an appropriate recognition look like? Sandy Darity is coming out with a book. Sandy Darity is a professor over at Duke. He's very good, very smart. He's coming out with a book on reparations saying that, look, it's a whole that's composed of 3 parts: recognition, restitution, and reconciliation. Before we even get to restitution, we have to look at what recognition looks like. And what would it look like for the U.S. government to recognize the problem? Right? And it looks like communicating to black communities that we're not going to do it again. We're not going to capitulate. Despite our history of capitulating to white anxiety, we're not going to do it again. So this isn't about how much money the U.S. government has to write to make black communities whole, like materially. It's how much the U.S. government has to write for the check to mean something. Like, so this isn't about what makes black communities like coffers full. This is about what shows that the U.S. government's willing to go through a little bit of pain, that's willing to cost something. Because any justice that's not willing to cost the U.S. government isn't going to be real justice, because they will, like, it's just going to be, it's not going to show black people that they're not going to capitulate to white anxiety. So this is about this is about the pound of flesh or the blood promise. I'm going to need a little bit of blood from the U.S. government to show that your promise means something. Because you promised a lot of things, government. You promised the Indians a lot of things. You promised the Native Americans a lot of things. You promised us a lot of things. There was 40 acres and a mule tossed around. So there are a lot of promises the government makes about securing freedom for black people that it just capitulates to when white people get nervous. So I don't want the stuff. I want the stuff and the promise that the government isn't going to capitulate to white power when white power gets nervous. And so what does that mean? So we had this problem in real estate. Right? What would happen in real estate was that a prospective buyer would look at, actually, before I talk about the earnest money, we're going to go to someone who actually, I think, gets the problem. Go ahead. A lot of people laugh at Marianne Williamson. I don't, because I think this lady says a lot of things that need to be said. And black people, and white people who are down for the cause, go ahead. She needs a little bit more support to get into the next debate. I think that she's an important voice that needs to be heard. And she sat down and talked to Antonio Moore, whom I support, and Yvette Carnell, whom I support. And I support her getting a place on the debate stage. I'm ultimately going to come down with Bernie because I think he gets working class politics a little bit more. But Marianne Williamson, she did good on this question. So I'm going to play a clip from Marianne Williamson on reparations. Hit it.
Ms. Williamson, many of your opponents support a commission to study the issue of reparations for slavery, but you are calling for up to $500 billion in financial assistance. What makes you qualified to determine how much is owed in reparations?
Well, first of all, it's not $500 billion in financial assistance. It's $500 billion, $200 to $500 billion, payment of a debt that is owed. That is what reparations is. We need some deep truth-telling when it comes. We don't need another commission to look at evidence. I appreciate what Congressman O'Rourke has said. It is time for us to simply realize that this country will not heal. All that a country is a collection of people. People heal when there's some deep truth-telling. We need to recognize that when it comes to the economic gap between blacks and whites in America, it does come from a great injustice that has never been dealt with. That great injustice has had to do with the fact that there was 250 years of slavery, followed by another 100 years of domestic terrorism. What makes me qualified to say 200 to 500 billion dollars? I'll tell you what makes me qualified. If you did the math of the 40 acres and a mule, given that there was 5 million slaves at the end of the Civil War. There were 4 to 5, and they were all promised 40 acres and a mule for every family of 4. If you did the math today, it would be trillions of dollars. And I believe that anything less than $100 billion is an insult. And I believe that 200 to 500 billion is politically feasible today because so many Americans realize there is an injustice that continues to form a toxicity underneath the surface, an emotional turbulence that only reparations.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Williamson, what's your response on the Flint water crisis?
My response on the Flint water crisis is that Flint is just the tip of the iceberg. I was recently in Denmark, South Carolina, where there is a lot of talk about it being the next Flint. We have an administration that has gutted the Clean Water Act. We have communities, particularly communities of color and disadvantaged communities all over this country, who are suffering from environmental injustice. I assure you, I lived in Grosse Pointe. What happened in Flint would not have happened in Grosse Pointe. This is part of the dark underbelly of American society. The racism, the bigotry, and the entire conversation that we're having here tonight, if you think any of this wonkiness is going to deal with this dark psychic force, the collectivized hatred that this president is bringing up in this country, then I'm afraid that the Democrats are going to see some very dark days. We need to say it like it is. It's bigger than Flint. It's all over this country. It's particularly people of color. It's particularly people who do not have the money to fight back. And if the Democrats don't start saying it, then why would people feel that they're there for us? And if those people don't feel it, they won't vote for us, and Donald Trump will win.
Thank you very much, Ms. Williamson. Ms. Williamson.
So that was a white lady who was telling the truth. And I appreciate her voice in this. There's a debt owed, but how is this debt structured? Her $500 billion is a small amount, but we have to understand what this debt is. This debt is like the ticklish dollar amount is going to be the dollar amount that's calibrated to showing the seriousness of the U.S. government. Not necessarily the dollar amount that's going to take, that's going to like actually, you know, do all the deferred maintenance and secure the institutions black people need. It's going to show the seriousness. That's the ticklish dollar amount. So there was a problem in real estate where we had buyers who would talk about buying the house and say like, look, I just need like, 2 months to talk to my bank and get a down payment and get a mortgage, and then I'd like to buy your house. And so if you're a seller of the house, you're like, great, I understand that mortgages take about a month and 6 weeks to get. But if I take this house off the market, I have some sort of assurance that you're actually serious about buying it, and you're not just going to, on a whim, decide that you weren't going to buy it. Which case, like, I eat all the risk as a seller, right? So they created a concept called earnest money, or the king's shilling. Earnest money is what you give the seller. That's not exactly money that's like the asking price of the house. It's just to show that you're serious about buying the house. And black people need earnest money from the U.S. government to show that it's serious about reparations. Because if we don't get that earnest money, or we get some sort of show that we're serious, then it doesn't matter anything else we get, because anytime white people get nervous, the U.S. government's just going to let white people take all the tanks and all the police they want to do whatever they want to black communities. So we need some sort of symbol to show that the U.S. is serious. We need some sort of the equivalent of earnest money. And the United States, you show earnest money, you show seriousness with checks. So this isn't about like, well, black people aren't financially literate enough to blow the check. No, this isn't about like what black people do with the money. This is about the U.S. government's willingness to pay the money, and pay till it hurts. Because that's what shows the seriousness. So it's not calibrated to like what we need to be made whole. It's calibrated to what the government needs in order to show its seriousness, to get to the next conversation about what kind of institutions or how we should structure restitution for reparations in order to make black communities whole. right? So what is, and I wrote a little, can you put up the picture? I wrote a little piece on Medium about this, reparations as earnest money, or earnest money as reparations. And go ahead and Google, I think, the title, and it'll come up. I think I put the argument down pretty, I put it in plain English. It only takes a minute or 2 minutes to read. But I think people underestimate how important this trust aspect is, because you're not free if you can't trust the government in the United States. If you don't think the government can secure your rights, then you don't really have rights. And there's a great introduction. You can take it down. There's a great bit that's in the introduction of The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual by Harold Cruz. Came out in 1968, but it's still true. That, look, we talk about rights as as if individuals have rights, but really, rights are secured in the United States by group power. And if a group doesn't have power, then you don't really have rights. And there are only 3 real groups in the United States: white Catholics, white Jews, and white Protestants. So black people, we can't secure our rights. Right? And then there's Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel came out with he's the PayPal billionaire in California. He said he had to help Hulk Hogan take out Gawker magazine, which was a news magazine that had besmirched Hulk Hogan's good name. He helped Hulk Hogan take out Gawker magazine because he thought, Hulk Hogan's just a single-digit millionaire. And as a single-digit millionaire, you don't really have access to the legal system. So this is a billionaire saying that single-digit millionaires don't really have rights because they don't have serious access to the legal system. And black people, if single-digit millionaires don't really have rights, we're just food. We are food. They can just take what they want because we can't defend ourselves. So we need some sort of surety from the U.S. government that it will defend our rights, or will at least secure us the means to defend our own rights. Because as it stands, the U.S. government has a horrible track record of securing black people's rights. It forgets us when white people get anxious about black people. It'll secure our rights, but then 3 white people get upset and it just won't. I had a friend who was talking to an economic development management in our local municipality. And the economic development management said, look, I would rather deal with 500 protesters in the streets than 50 rich people. Right? And I'm in Athens, Georgia. Those 50 rich people don't have to come from Athens, Georgia. He was talking about 50 rich people from Oconee County, the neighboring White Flight County. So he would rather deal with 500 poor Athenians in the street than 50 wealthy people from the adjacent county. That's how much money equals power. So I need some sort of surety that these local municipalities, the state, and the federal government will secure black people's rights, because it doesn't matter how much stuff we get for reparations if it's not secured by the governing power. Because we'll only ever be 12, 13% of the United States. And look, Durham and Rosewood and Tulsa, Oklahoma all included black people with real money. But then white people got nervous and the government helped white people, take our money. And the best thing about Tulsa, the Greenwood riot, Black Wall Street, is that you talk to people who were in Tulsa. They're like, we were in it. We could have fought them off until the bombs started being dropped. And that's when we kind of lost it. Right? So as long as the government controls the bombs and white people's anxieties control government, then black people aren't really worth much. Black rights aren't really rights. So we need to talk about what kind of reparations to include, what kind of acknowledgement would include a surety that black people's rights actually mean something. And that means it's not calibrated to addressing the wealth gap as much as calibrated to addressing what would it look like for the U.S. government to show its pain, to give till it hurts, to show that it's more scared of not securing black people's rights than it is of white anxiety. Because the history of America has shown the opposite. All right? So we need to think in those terms. I mean, I could draw a dollar amount. We need America to give till it hurts. Because America needs to show that it's not willing It's not willing to do that again if white people get nervous. Because let's be honest, if black people come for reparations, reparations are going to include quite a bit of redistribution. And that means we're going to redistribute some of white people's land, right? So, for example, Ted Turner is the biggest landowner in the United States. If black people are going to get justice, it's going to include taking some of Ted Turner's land. Ted Turner also has a private army. So Ted Turner's got a private military force full of private guns who are going to say, like, we don't want to give up this land. So what's the U.S. government going to do in that case? That's the open question. Is it going to say, like, sorry, Ted Turner, we're going to take your land and give it to black people? Or is it going to say, like, well, sorry, well, we tried. I'm sorry, but Ted Turner got mad, and sorry, black people, you're just going to have to, continue living in degradation. The history of U.S. politics suggests the latter. I want the former, right? So that's what we're going for. And what's it going to take for the U.S. government to show me to not only make black people whole, but give the appearance that we're making black communities whole? And with that, I think I've laid out the problem. If you support anything I'm doing, you know what I'm doing is making myself darn near unemployable. So if you support anything I'm doing and you still want me to actually keep doing it and be employed doing it, I'm going to need you to go to www.thefunkyacademic.com or just funkyacademic.com and kick down for $5, $15, or $50 a month. Because I'm trying to give you the quality of news that you're not going to get on other stations. And I think it's important. And also share this around. Maybe skip your Sunday school group. And instead of reading Luke, you could just watch and talk about what I say. Because, according to Niebuhr, justice is what love looks like in a fallen world. So, like, you want to love your neighbor, you need to secure them justice. And I'm just trying to teach people how to secure their neighbor's justice, right? And also your book club. A lot of you guys don't read the books, and maybe that's okay as long as you watch this and then talk about it. And preferably read the books, but like next time, also do this. Maybe read the book 1 month and then do this the next month and then read the book the month after. Because I'm trying to give you something to talk about in a way that secures people justice and makes you a better neighbor. So thank you for your time and consideration. And I will see you next week. America, my name is Osei-Frimpong, and we're watching the Black Athenians today, and I come to you every Friday at 4-ish. And today we're going to talk about the real problem with reparations.